Hey guys, this is part 6, and this, I'm positive, is the last part. In the previous slides, we talked about the ESA, the Endangered Species Act, and we talked about how they tend to protect the species. One of the things that they do is actually habitat protection. So, like I said in the previous video, when you do habitat protection, you are actually taking some land that people use, whether it's for residents, whether it's logging, farming, dairy farming, anything, and then preserving it for whatever animal you're trying to save. Now that is a problem because we do have a large population and people need that land. So as soon as this law was passed in 1973, there was multiple, obviously, lawsuits that went through. There was multiple. Supreme Court came up with this kind of a happy medium. And then, okay, in the next few slides, we're going to talk about how the happy medium actually does not work. So they came up with a happy medium, which said that landowners, if they are able to do a fair use of the land. That means they can use the land for whatever obvious uses it has without disrupting the endangered species. So it's kind of designed to allow human beings to actually cohabitate with these species, but obviously it did not work out that way, just because, again, in the immortal words of me, idiots. Um, in the next few slides, we're going to look at how the controversy in the ESA. So this is a slide that you guys don't have. So it's going to be on the video for quite some time. So kind of try to write it down. These are the slides that I've added actually are going to help you out a lot in writing your essays. Not so much in terms of multiple choice, but essays, yes. So a couple of things the ESA does is that let's say you own a house and suddenly they found a specific kind of dung beetle in your backyard that is on the endangered list. All of a sudden now you've been living in this house for quite some time, and now you have to follow all these special rules of things that you can do in your backyard, you cannot do in your backyard, how much water can seep in, and how much, especially if you're living in a place like Connecticut, think about it, how are you going to control the amount of water in your backyard? I don't have water right now, so that's why, how am I going to control that? Like, it is a little more difficult, and it's not as easy as one thinks that, hey, we're just going to give up some land and things are going to work out. We have already encroached into their territory. So giving up means actually fully pulling back. We as human beings cannot do that, because if we fully pulled back and left the land to all the animals, then we have no place to live. So then we would be on the endangered species. So right now, if you harm any of the animals on the endangered species list, you are eligible for a $100,000 fine and jail time. Now, here is the problem. Sometimes, again, because idiots, they do make mistakes in figuring out where these animals actually live. So your house, your backyard, if designated as the new endangered dung beetles habitat, you are not allowed to do any kind of renovation on it. Your house is literally valued at $0. You cannot sell it. However, they have no means of telling for sure that the dung beetle actually lives in your backyard. So it can be arbitrarily designated. And we will talk about the American alligator in a little while. So the fair use of land, while they do tell you, while Supreme Court has said that fair use is allowed, you can farm, you can do lumber activity, construction, fair human use is allowed. It is not without certain prohibitions, regulations, rules and regulations to allow these animals to live. So it kind of becomes a little bit difficult for human beings to actually survive in these conditions. So it becomes one of those situations where as human beings, we have to weigh our own well-being with that of the dung beetle. So it is a contentious situation, to say the least. For example, I think I've talked about a lot about it in class about the delta smelt that lives in the reservoir, and Central California gets no water because of that, and they are digging into the aquifer to take out water, while the delta smelt is safe in the reservoir and is growing and is thriving. The rest of California is suffering because they are digging into the aquifer, causing subduction of the land and every other problem that follows. So most of the times we do have really short-sighted ways of protecting animals. You know, unfortunately, we've already done the damage. Some of these animals just have to die. Unfortunately, they just have to go extinct because we have really caused so much damage to their habitat already that trying to restore them is going to come at a huge economic and social cost to human beings themselves. Obviously, there is one of the other problems with this is once your house or the neighborhood that you're living in or the place you're living in has been designated by the ESA as some kind of breeding ground, feeding ground, or anything related to an animal on the endangered species list, it loses value. So once you've lost value, if you're a middle class person in the United States, all your savings is basically tied up in your house. And if your house loses value, you are about 5 seconds away from standing under the bridge and selling oranges. So we have millions and millions of acres that have been wrongly designated for animal protection. Sometimes even when the animal actually does not live in that area at all, there's no proof that the animal lives in that area. Still, millions and millions of acres are taken away from human residents to protect a single species. Again, it is as sad as it sounds. We have already done so much harm to certain species that trying to turn that clock back is actually more harmful to to the existence of human beings. For example, many years ago, 20 years ago, the American alligator was put on that list. This was found in the swamplands and stuff like that. So Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and all these places, they were put on the endangered species list. Unfortunately, they made a small mistake, which is they did not document the number of alligators correctly. So their documentation said that they had about 1,400 of them left in the wild. Unfortunately, that was grossly underestimated. It was close to having 1% of what was actually there. Right now, we have a very thriving alligator hunting business. We have a couple of reality shows about alligator hunting also. However, the lands that were designated as alligator breeding or foraging or roosting, resting, any of those things, areas are still under the ESA, which means they are still protected. And millions of people are denied access to those lands. There's no fair use of those lands. People are not able to live on those lands. They are not able to do agriculture on those lands. There's no economic benefit from those lands because of a mistake, because of a bureaucratic mistake made in the case of the alligator. So it is not a sum zero kind of a game. It's having protections for endangered species is not always the right thing. At some point of time, we do have to make concessions. There has to be a happy balance. Survival of the American alligator or the gray wolf is very important, but at the same time, survival of human beings is also very important. So there has to be a happy balance. So that is the cons of ESA. Please remember that your textbook actually does not talk about the cons. So this is where you're going to get your cons from. Don't watch the video. You don't have any cons. Controversial, again, is the same thing without going into as much detail as we talked about. Gap analysis basically is trying to seek different places that might have our hotspots of biodiversity where there's a huge number of species richness, but they're not protected as yet. It is a method for the ESA to find places that are filled with species but have no protection, and then to bring them under the realm of protection. It's just a bureaucratic way of increasing the power of the ESA. And I'm not saying it as a bad thing. I'm not saying that ESA is a bad act. I'm just saying that it's sometimes run by idiots. Habitat protection, again, we've talked about this. So, again, this is the part that you must pay attention to, that whatever plan we make for habitat protection, it is very important that this plan is not, it's not a 10-year plan, it's not a 20-year plan, it is for centuries for evolution of that ecosystem. International, you need to remember that name. Again, it's very interesting actually. And the Convention of International Trade and in Endangered Animals kind of have done about, they are pretty good at regulating certain animals, but we've all heard stories of people stuffing monkeys down their pants and flying them across the country. So are they very successful? No. Are they the best we have? Yes. Captive breeding, again, a lot. Zoos play a very vital role. As much as I do not like zoos, just because I don't like to watch animals locked up, they are really very important, an important link in the chain for captive breeding and bringing certain bringing certain animals back to, like, increasing their numbers and bringing them back to life. But there is a lot of controversy surrounding that also, because genetic diversity goes down. You also are saving certain kinds of pathogens that might die out with the species. So it's not a zero-sum game. When you do captive breeding, you might be saving an animal that possesses is a vector of a virus that's going to eventually kill the human race. One of the very interesting things they do is that they are able to find the close relatives of animals and go down the phylogeny and try to recreate an animal that has gone extinct. They've not been very successful with it, but they have come close. So couple of the animals that have been protected, just remember these names. These are due to captive breeding. Just remember the names. The white rhino there are over 1,700 of them today in private parks and ranches. Captive breeding issues, this is what I was talking about. Should we protect them? And if we should, how should we protect them? Again, the most important thing to remember here is this part. It's sometimes species, when they go extinct, they also take with them certain pathogens that die out. For example, if we let all the chimpanzees and all the gorillas die out, we would kill Ebola. So should we do it? Should we protect these animals if they are vectors of certain diseases? So when it comes to the existence of human beings, there is a moral and ethical, we have a moral and ethical obligation to the animals around us, but we also have a moral and ethical and an evolutionary obligation towards our own preservation and sustenance. So that is the end of this chapter, and I will be starting chapter 12 very soon. I don't know when, but I'll be done with it like in a day or so. See you guys. Bye.